I've been wanting to do this video for a while now where I just kind of do a breakdown of my November 10th muzzleloader hunt. So this is just a section of the property. It's kind of in the northern half. And in the left side of the screen over here is west. And this particular stand is an elevated blind platform that I just fabricated up using a couple different things. I bought the platform from just one of the big box stores, and it has it's about 7 feet, and it has mesh flooring. So I got some rubber like mats, like foam workout mats, and zip tied them to the floor so that it would actually have a solid floor to keep scent from blowing down through the mesh. And then I bought just a cheap pop-up blind and stuck on the top of it. And I actually did a previous video where I showed kind of how I did each step. But I've got two of those set up on the west side, and the reason that I did that is because the wind tends to swirl a lot. I actually have a ridge that kind of runs down along this direction, and so the wind, if it blows across that ridge, it tends to kind of swirl back into the interior of the property. And so on that morning, they were actually calling for a northeast wind, which would have that swirling effect. But a lot of people, as most people know, what's the predicted wind isn't always what's reality when you get to your property. So when I got there that morning, the wind was actually kind of coming more from the south southeast. So over here on the western side where the blind is, it's kind of blowing out into the pasture, and then towards the interior of the property, it's just kind of blowing up towards the northwest corner a little bit more. So this was the wind that morning. And this particular buck, he was a 9 pointer. I started getting him on camera in about mid to late October. And once he moved in, I started getting him pretty consistently, both daytime and nighttime. And in this section of the property, so I kind of wanted to just walk through the couple of improvements that I made, and sort of the movement, the path of movement that I tried to create. And he kind of followed the script in a way, but not he didn't really use the trails exactly how they were set up, but he did seem to try to check the enhancement areas in a way that I designed them. So when I first saw him, he was directly in front of the stand, because the stand actually faces east. It's facing straight into the interior of the property. And so this is about where I saw him initially. He was about 75 or 80 yards through the timber, and I could see him well enough to tell that he was a good buck, but I couldn't get any clear shots, and I never really saw him well, to the point where I could identify which buck it was. But he was just south of this food plot, and he was just kind of meandering, eating some acorns from a mature willow oak that's right here off the corner of this plot. And he hung around for a good 5 minutes or so, and then he kind of started to make his way back towards this bedding area on the eastern side. So he kind of ended up going this direction. And after, I don't know, 10 or 15 yards, I mean, I completely lost sight of him at that point. And so my only thought was, I'm going to have to try to call him over to my side of the property. So I started with the grunt call, and then I used a doe bleat. And I wasn't sure what he was going to do, if he could even hear it, or if he was going to come back. But essentially what it looked like was he was going to come over towards this little bedding area. And I actually cut this in back in September, so it had only been a couple of months. And I'd gotten some pretty regular usage. I have a camera up here, and there was a doe family group that was consistently moving back and forth along this trail that I cut in between the food plot and this little bedding pocket. And as you can see, the trail continues down. It comes down to this other bedding pocket a little further to the south. And so I don't know if this buck had come on this trail initially before I saw him, but I do know that as he kind of worked his way away from me, he was headed towards this little bedding area. So what I think he was doing was just going to kind of go like this direction and try to get downwind to scent check this bedding. So I think what he did next was as a result of me using the calls. He ended up swinging up above this food plot and then kind of working his way back towards the stand, and he was still sort of in the timber, and I think he was just trying to scent check, get downwind of where he thought those calls had come from. So that's what led me to believe that he kind of swung up and around. And when I first saw him, he was kind of to my 11 o'clock, somewhere in this vicinity. And he was kind of just working his way down towards this other trail that goes in front and parallels the pasture. And so all of it happened fairly quickly from the time I reconnected. He was about here, maybe 50 or so, 55 yards out. Like I said, he was working his way down this direction. And then he stopped broadside about 35 yards just straight out in front of me. So this is about where I took the shot. And so after the shot, he took a couple of jumps. He made it maybe 25 or 30 yards, and I thought he fell right about in this area here. And so after a couple minutes, I could see his tail flick a few times, and I knew he was down, but I was just trying to wait it out at that point. And then surprisingly, he got back up. And so this is the first time I've ever had that happen with the muzzleloader. Typically, what I see in my experience is, once they go down with the muzzleloader, I mean, as long as you put a good shot on them, they typically don't get back up. So that kind of surprised me when I first saw that. And so what he kind of did was continue to make his way southeast. He didn't go very far. He was just kind of stumbling a little bit. So he got down in this area, and I could see a little bit of white, but I couldn't really tell if he laid back down or if he fell. I never heard him fall. So I was just trying to wait him out a little bit. And so after a while, I was kind of unsure of what had happened. I thought maybe I'd hit him high in the shoulder since he was able to get back up. And so what I decided to do was just kind of ease my way over to see if I needed to put a follow-up shot. If it had been a high shoulder shot and it wasn't lethal, but he was obviously, not able to move well, I wanted to go ahead and get that second shot in. So I kind of eased my way from the blind, and I guess I got within about maybe 45 yards where I could see him clear enough to tell that he was still alive. But, he was in this area. He was kind of stumbling. He'd fall, try to get back up. And there's a little draw down in this, like just a tiny little bottom right here. And that's where he ultimately fell, like just on the other side, and expired about right here. So like I said, he didn't go very far. And what I ended up finding out was the bullet deflected. So I had hit him right just behind the crease of the front shoulder, and somehow the bullet deflected and exited out in front of his hind quarter on the opposite side. And I've never had that happen with a muzzleloader bullet before. Typically I get clean pass-throughs, so I'm not exactly sure why that happened this time. I mean, he was standing broadside, so it's not like he was quartering to. I could understand if he was quartering to, but he was broadside. And so again, it just surprised me. But I wanted to just go through this breakdown to show, how the design of the property, how the improvements that I made, where I made them, the trails, and sort of creating this path of movement, how I think it helped in this hunt, as well as, playing the wind. So obviously my scent was blowing away from him, off the property, and then using the call, I think in a timely manner. If I had hit the call too soon, when he could still see, my direction, I could still see him. It might have spooked him. He might not have come in, but I think by calling when I did, as after he got out of sight, it allowed him to, or I guess piqued his curiosity, and just drew him in. Like I said, he came in sort of on the downwind side, trying to scent check where he thought those calls had come from. So again, he kind of was using these areas that I had created. I don't know if he actually took this trail specifically, but I know he was at least using the general vicinity of that trail. And then, when he did come back my direction, he was almost on the trail. He was headed towards this trail when I took the shot. So, he didn't necessarily follow the script, quote unquote, but he was using the property similar to the way that I tried to set it up. So hopefully that all makes sense, and maybe you got something out of it. And then thanks for sticking around and watching.